Mr. Sergeant at Arms, invite the members into the chamber and close the doors. I hereby declare the House of Representatives of the 113th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee now in session. Will the members please stand? Will the visitors in the gallery please stand and remain standing through the Pledge of Allegiance? Representative Martin of Hamilton will introduce the chaplain of the day. Representative Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my privilege to have my friend, Pastor Mitch McClure, to be here today to lead us in our prayer and as our chaplain. Mitch was educated at East Tennessee State and has a Master of Arts degree in pastoral counseling from the Church of God Theological Seminary. More importantly than being educated by his fellow man, he listens to the Spirit of the Lord, where he's been educated on the things of God. Mitch is a man who's been married for over 40 years to his bride, Sherry, but more than being a husband, he is a member of the Bride of Christ. He has 2 children, one who serves in the United States Army as a chaplain, but more than being a father, he is a child of God who has access to the throne of the Lord. Mitch is a person who has served in the communities in which he's lived as president of the PTA at various schools, including those in our community at Gans Middle Valley and Loftus Middle School. He served as the chairman of the board of the Dallas Bay Volunteer Fire Department. He served on the Hamilton County Board of Commissioners for a time, served as the chaplain of the Sheriff's Department, and currently serves as the chaplain of the EMT. But more than being a servant of others, he is a servant of God. And he's going to usher us in to the throne of God. He's been a pastor now since 1977, pastored in our community for over 25 years. More than being a shepherd in our community, he bows his knee in allegiance to the under-shepherd, the Lord Jesus, who walks and leads us into the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. I'm so glad to have my friend, Mitch McClure, pastor of the Middle Valley Church of God, to lead us in a moment of prayer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to pray for you and the members of this body, a body that I respect. It's an opportunity that I think God has given me, and I thank you for it. I'm going to be praying from a Christian perspective, and I'd ask you to pray along with me. Let's pray. Almighty God, thank you for loving us from when we were in our mother's womb. Your love will never, ever end. Your love can't be taken away from us, and nothing will separate us from that love. I'm thankful for that love, and we will love you. Almighty God, you're a God of all wisdom and understanding. Before time and history began, you knew all things, and you do not change. You continue to know all things, and because you know all things, we can seek you and ask you for wisdom. Your word tells us that when we need wisdom and understanding, to seek you, and you promise to give it to us. You promise to lead us and guide us. You promise to help us, and we will seek you. And Almighty God, you are a God of order, not confusion. You created all things in an orderly manner. You continue to hold your creation together in an orderly manner. You're not the author of confusion, but of order, and we will seek your order in our lives. Well, God, you blessed us. You blessed this great state. You blessed these leaders. You blessed our nation. We ask you to continue to do that because we will be good stewards of your blessing. And Lord, I close this prayer with a request for your help today. Please help these leaders as they make decisions that impact others. Please let all their discussion be pleasing to you and give these leaders clarity of thought and the right purpose in all they do. We seek your help. And Lord, you'll never change. You love us. You'll never quit loving us. You'll help us, and we thank you. And we're going to continue to seek you. And I pray this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Representative Martin will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Attention, salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Clerk, take the roll.
Roll call.
Mr. Clerk, take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 80 members present.
Let journal reflect Representatives Terry, Hemmer, and Whitson are excused. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Welcoming and honoring.
Welcoming. Oh, we have presentations. Representative Kiesling, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request that Sergeant of Arms escort a guest into the chamber.
Mr. Sergeant of Arms, escort the guests to the well, please. Representative Kiesling, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request that the clerk read the resolution, please.
Mr. Clerk, read the resolution.
House Joint Resolution 162 by Chairman Kiesling, a resolution to honor the memory of Kelly Walker of Scott County. Whereas the members of this General Assembly were greatly saddened to learn of the untimely passing of Kelly Michelle Asbury Walker, and whereas born on May 15th, 1984 in Scott County, Ms. Walker was the daughter of Jeff and Pat Asbury. She was a graduate of Scott High School, and she received a master's degree from Tennessee Technological University before she briefly entered a doctoral program. And whereas Mrs. Walker returned home to pursue nonprofit work, and in 2009, she began her career at the Children's Center of the Cumberlands, in which position her passion for helping local children grew exponentially. And whereas with a vision to protect the most vulnerable children of Scott County, Ms. Walker provided quality care and service, and she was responsible for providing staff training opportunities, contracting local nurses for victims of child abuse, and obtaining transitional housing for children in state custody. And whereas Ms. Walker and her husband founded Kip's Closet in 2020 to honor their late son, Kip McCoy. Through the organization, they collected clothing and other necessities for children that were placed in state custody with no personal belongings. And whereas through opportunities with the Department of Children's Services, local law enforcement, and the Elgin Foundation, Ms. Walker strengthened many relationships with the working partners of the Children's Center. She also ensured support and services with several other nonprofit organizations. And whereas Ms. Walker was also deeply devoted to her family, and she always endeavored to remain true to family values of the highest order. And whereas Ms. Walker leaves behind an indelible legacy of integrity and probity of public life, compassion and loyalty in private life, and diligence and dedication in all her chosen endeavors. And whereas it is fitting that the members of this General Assembly should pause to remember a bountiful life of this exceptional public servant and human being, now therefore be resolved by the House of Representatives of the 113th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee, the Senate concurring, that we honor the memory of Kelly Michelle Asbury Walker, reflecting fondly upon her impeccable character and her stalwart commitment to living the examined life with courage and conviction. Be it further resolved that we express our sympathy and offer our condolences to the family of Ms. Walker.
Representative Kiesling, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, clerk. Members, today we're honoring a lady who was truly one of many things. Community leader, civically, defender of children. You heard the resolution. A visionary. A person who was loved by all those with whom she served there at the Children's Center of the Cumberlands. She was a wife. Most importantly, a mother of two young daughters that she absolutely adored. With us today are Kelly's parents, Jeff and Pat Asbury. Staff members, as you can see to my left, to the right, staff members there at the center. We have District Attorney General Jared Effler with us, as well as Senator Yeager. All three of us, Senator Yeager, General, we had a very close working relationship with Kelly. She with us as well. Senator Yeager, I will defer to you, and then if you would, following your remarks, if you would defer to General Effler, please.
Thank you, Representative Kiesling, for this honor and privilege to join with others to honor Kelly Asbury Walker, who I had the privilege to know for several years. An extraordinary person in every way, because she cared about people wherever they were or in whatever condition she might find them. Of course, I knew her primarily through the Children's Center of the Cumberland, where she served as the director there with great energy and passion. And even served, did not let her illness hold her back during many of the years of that service, which is very admirable indeed. Of course, her illness took her at an untimely young age, I think, which reminds me of an expression that I want to share that I think is very apt. The measure of a person's life is not its duration, but its donation. Kelly Asbury Walker lived all too briefly with us. She's in heaven now. But while she was here, she has made an extraordinary donation that will serve generations to come. So it's my privilege to join with the community in Scott County to honor her and memorialize her today, and I'm honored to introduce the General Jared Effler.
Thank you, Senator Yeager. One of my greatest honors as District Attorney General was to work alongside Kelly Walker and to be a voice for abused and neglected children. Kelly Walker was a pioneer whose work benefited not only abused children in Scott and Fentress counties, but across our great state. And that's why it's fitting that she be recognized here in our state capitol tonight. So on behalf of Kelly's many friends, her dear family, and everyone from the District Attorney General's office, I want to personally say thank you to Representative Kiesling, Senator Yeager, and our distinguished legislature for this very, very fitting tribute. Thank you.
Representative Kiesling.
Speaker, if you would, we would like to have a photo if you would, please.
Representative Howell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I request that the Sergeant at Arms escort our guests into the chamber.
Mr. Sergeant of Arms, escort the guests to the well, please. Representative Howell, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I request the clerk read the resolution.
Mr. Clerk, please read the resolution.
Senate Joint Resolution 482 by Chairman Howell, resolution to commend Deputy Commissioner and Chief Policy Advisor Paul D. Deggs for his honorable and astute service to the state of Tennessee on the occasion of his retirement. Whereas it's fitting that the members of this General Assembly should especially recognize those public servants who have dedicated themselves to improving the quality of life for their fellow citizens. And whereas one such individual is Paul D. Deggs, who has evinced the greatest integrity and probity during his time as Deputy Commissioner and Chief Policy Advisor for the Tennessee Department of Transportation, from which position he is seeking his much deserved retirement. And whereas after working seasonally for TDOT as a college student in 1986 to 1987, Mr. Deggs began his full-time career with the organization in 1988 as an engineer in training, thereafter ascending to the post of manager of hydraulic design sections in 1994, assistant director of the construction division in 1998, Region 3 Division Director in 2000, and Assistant Chief Engineer in 2003. And whereas beginning in 2004, Mr. Deggs served TDOT as Deputy Commissioner and Chief Engineer, overseeing the design and implementation of all the department's highway engineering projects through the management of the activities of 11 divisions and 4 regional offices. And he was responsible for work product of more than 4,000 employees. And whereas in addition to being responsible for the entirety of Tennessee's 1,360 miles of freeway and 13,884 state highways, as well as the bridges, rest areas, welcome centers, way stations, bicycle lanes, and sidewalks attendant to them. His duties have also included oversight of the state's airport and rail systems. And whereas in August 2022, Deputy Commissioner Deggs was appointed to serve as TDOT's Chief Policy Advisor, he served concurrently as Vice Chairman of the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, Council on Highways and Streets. And whereas highly regarded in his profession, he has served as board member of the National Center for Pavement Preservation and a member of the Research and Technology Committee of the United States Federal Highway Administration. And whereas Mr. Deggs is a licensed engineer and holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering from Tennessee Technological University, as well as certificates from the University of Tennessee's Tennessee Government Executive Institute and Lipscomb University's Spark Idea Center Leadership Institute. And whereas his many accomplishments aside, he is grateful for the love and support of his wife, Sandra, with whom he lives in Williamson County, and their 2 children and 2 grandchildren. And whereas Mr. Deggs is wholly committed to the noble precepts of public service that have earned Tennessee recognition as a volunteer state, and he should be specially recognized. Now, therefore, be resolved by the Senate of the 113th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee, the House of Representatives concurring, that we hereby commend Deputy Commissioner and Chief Policy Advisor Paul D. Deggs for 3.5 decades of astute service with the Tennessee Department of Transportation, and wish him all the best in his retirement.
Representative Howell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, it is indeed an honor for me to join you in recognizing Mr. Paul Deggs, who has served this state as TDOT's Chief Engineer, Deputy Commissioner, and Interim Commissioner throughout his 35 years of service to this state. Paul joined the TDOT team in 1988. After graduating from Tennessee Tech, he became chief engineer in 2004 and served in that role for 18 years, was given the additional title of deputy commissioner in 2011. In that role, it's impossible for one resolution to detail all the accomplishments of this gentleman here and what he's done for this state. But in that role, he managed the activities of 11 divisions, all 4 TDOT regional offices, and he is ending his TDOT career after 35 years with the agency. He is an engineer of distinction. He's my friend and a friend to all Tennesseans, and I think it's appropriate to say on this occasion that Paul has given his all for Tennessee. Mr. Speaker, yes.
Representative Howell.
Mr. Speaker, would you recognize Paul Deggs, please?
Mr. Deggs.
Thank you, Chairman Howell, and thank you, Speaker. And thank you, members of the Tennessee General Assembly's House of Representatives. So I thought I would just give a few words today. You know, the highest form of wealth is the ability to make a difference. And I think that everybody sitting at one of these tables knows that that's why you're here. When I began my career at TDOT back in the 1980s, our transportation system was not what it is today. It could use a little bit of work. But over the last 35 years, I've worked on projects that have addressed this need in every single county of the state. I have been to every single county in the state on multiple occasions. I will note that when you travel around the state, that you find a lot of good places to eat too, and I reflect that personally. But you know, something that's worth having is worth paying for. And through legislation like the 86 Road Program, the Better Bridges Program, the Improve Act, and most recently, the Transportation Modernization Act, together we found ways to fund road, bridge, and all type of transportation needs. And these comprehensive transportation investments have made a monumental difference in improving the economic prospects and quality of life of all Tennesseans. I will also note that built on a pay-as-you-go basis instead of borrowed money, these investments are now a gift to our descendants rather than a burden of debt on them in the years to come. It really makes me think, you know, we all walk around with change in our pockets, and, you know, every U.S. coin has E pluribus unum written on it, out of many one. And, you know, from the Backbone Tunnel on State Route 133 in Johnson County to the Hernando de Soto Bridge on I-40 in Shelby County, or from the Dam Deli on US 64 in Ocoee, or Boyette's on State Route 22 in Tiptonville. Like I said, I've found a few good places to eat. And Chairman Howe, you can't beat the country fried steak at the Dam Deli, you know. But and all the places in between, big and small, we have worked with people and communities across the state to spread the peanut butter as evenly as we can across the state based on where people live, where roads are, to where we are making these investments that support bringing people together as one state to create the wealth by making a difference in every Tennessean's life. So just something to remember after my 35 years. If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And so I challenge you, my friends, to go far. Again, thank you for your recognition.
Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I will attest to the fact that the Dam Deli is a great place for some country food. It's about a mile from my house, right below the Ocoee Dam. That's why it's called the Dam Deli. And we've sampled it, haven't we, Paul? Certainly have. Of course, behind every good man is a good woman. We're glad to have Paul's wife, Sandra, with us tonight as well. Mr. Speaker, would you join us for a photo in the well?
welcome and honoring Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a page today, Hannah Kate McFadden. I first met Hannah Kate, goodness, 5 years ago when I was first running for office. And at 13, she created a candidate pledge with an attempt to bring civility into our elections. As she's continued working her way through this, she's created a candidate pledge. And some of the things that you have to agree to sign it is remember you are serving the people. You have to act through model leadership, agree to disagree with civility, support one another. There's a whole list. I was proud to be the first person to sign it this year. I encourage everybody to press your page button and have her come around and talk to you about it. She's quite an impressive young lady who will very likely be serving in this body if she chooses. And her mom is up in the gallery, Brandy. I know how proud she is. So anyway, let's welcome Hannah Kate.
Representative Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, earlier this year, this body unanimously passed a resolution designating today as Electrical Line Worker Appreciation Day. And we actually have some of those fine gentlemen up here to my right. If you'll stand up, guys, and the members, if you'll make them feel welcome.
Representative Hakeem. I'm sorry, I thought you were coming down wanting to be recognized. All right, sorry about that. Leary Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members, I have Ms. Crystal Bracey from the Philos Project visiting us. Philos Black, where is she? She's up there. Make her feel welcome.
You. Representative Sapicki.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, there's been a lot that's gone on in our state the last few weeks. A lot of discussion, a lot of anger, a lot of debate. We need to remember that 6 lives were lost a short time ago. Cut off. Families did not have children come home. Husbands did not have wives come home, or husbands. Members, there were 9 service members that perished in a helicopter crash shortly after that. Tragedy upon tragedy. And then lastly, the severe weather that came through Tennessee and killed our citizens. More tragedy. These are difficult times in Tennessee, and we know that. We have to always rise to honor those Tennesseans that have paid the ultimate sacrifice, trying to do the things, just live their life every day. We have to remember, members, that we represent 7 million Tennesseans from all different backgrounds, all different creeds, all different races. And we have a job to do here. And that's to continue to move Tennessee forward. And I hope, and I pray, and I hope you all pray, that we can keep those individuals that have lost their lives, and we can always focus on, we are always trying to do the best thing for the people of Tennessee. And with that, Mr. Speaker, let's give a moment of silence for those individuals. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Sparks. At Sapicki's desk.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to catch those linemen before they leave. My father-in-law was a lineman, Gary Smith, for NES for many years. I think sometimes we take electricity for granted, especially in the cold days that we have and the freezing temperatures. These guys are unsung heroes. My father-in-law I'd seen him get up at 3 in the morning, show up for work. I've heard him tell a story about a guy that got electrocuted and killed in front of him. He once fell off a pole, was injured really bad, but we take electricity, we take these guys for granted. So y'all give it up for our lineman that I think just left here. Y'all give him another big round of applause. Thank you.
Representative Gant, you're recognized. Out of order. Representative Gant, you're recognized. Representative Gant, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, our state treasurer, David Lillard, lost his father last week. And David Lillard Sr. and me and him served on the Fayette County Commission for several years together. And he was a great individual from Fayette County, served the citizens of Fayette County very well with distinction, and is somebody that is to be honored here tonight on this floor. And if y'all would join me in a moment of silence as we honor his life and commitment that he had to public service. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to welcome our newest member to the House Chambers, State Representative Justin Jones.
Welcome and honoring. All right. Next order, Mr. Clerk. Oh, sorry, Representative Lynn. Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this weekend, actually yesterday, I lost a friend. She was a mother. She became a mother at 42 years old. She died at 53 years old. 2 little twin boys, blessed her life. And they are now without a mother. Her husband is disabled, and she was the family breadwinner. So it's a very sad situation, and we all know so many sad situations in our lives, things that happen. The Jewish faith, they believe that the soul remains on earth 3 days before going off to heaven. And whenever we have our moments of silence, I always pray that the Holy Spirit, the Lord, will allow that little soul to maybe visit their family in a dream and give them comfort, or a little bird to show up and give comfort to the family. And actually, that happened to my neighbor just a couple of weeks ago when she lost her father. So would you join me just in a moment of prayer? And together, let's just pray that just a little sign will show up and show this little family comfort, because they're hurting very much today. Thank you. Amen.
Thank you. Representative Capley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to welcome Mr. Wally Beasley and Troop 154 from Murray County to the House today. Y'all please make them feel welcome.
Representative Jones. All right, audience, the members in the balcony, there's to be no disruptions from the balcony. That's the protocol here. I ask you to refrain, please. There's members on the floor asking you to refrain. Please refrain from disrupting the proceedings. Thank you. Representative Jones.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I want to welcome the people back to the people's house. I want to welcome democracy back to the people's house. That on last Thursday, members of this body tried to crucify democracy, but today we stand as a witness of a resurrection of a movement of a multiracial democracy, that no unjust decision will stand. And that this represents the point that there comes a time where time itself is ready for a change, that time has come back here in Nashville, Tennessee. That truth crushed to the ground will rise again, that what you intend for evil can be used for good, to restore the heart of democracy in our state. And so I come here to stand with my constituents, with the people of Tennessee, to say that no unjust attack on democracy will happen unchallenged. That the abuse of this body will not happen in the comfort of silence. And so I come here, most importantly, though, not as an individual, but I come here to say that the people of District 52, 78,000 people, have a voice in this chamber once again. I'm hopeful for the days ahead for Tennessee, not because of the actions of this body, but because of the actions of the people out there and the thousands gathered outside this chamber right now, who are calling for something better, who responded to your attacks on democracy with an attack of a mass movement for social justice and racial justice and economic justice to restore the heart of our state. And so I want to thank you all, not for what you did, but for awakening the people of this state, particularly the young people. Thank you for reminding us that the struggle for justice is fought and won in every generation. And so the people of Tennessee, I stand with you. We will continue to be your voice here, and no expulsion, no attempt to silence us will stop us, but it will only galvanize and strengthen our movement. And we continue to show up in the people's house. Power to the people.
All right. That's out of order. That's the second time. One more time. And unfortunately, I will not be able to determine who is yelling during the proceedings. So I would have to clear the whole thing out. So for the third time, please refrain from disrupting the proceedings. Thank you. Welcome and honoring Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have several members of our Metro Council who are here. Want them to stand also, and members will please make them feel welcome. They're up there on the right-hand side of the balcony. Thank you all for being here tonight.
Representative Dixie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We also have former Senator and Representative Brenda Gilmore here, so please make her feel welcome as well. She's here. Thank you.
Representative Grills.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and my fellow members. Last Wednesday, we had our annual Ag Day, celebrating the Tennessee's #1 industry in the state. And at that Ag Day, we had a contest, a corn shelling contest between the House and the Senate. And I would like to report to you individuals that the House brought home the bacon this week, or last week. We have us a corn shelling trophy, and we will be displaying it there at the Speaker's perch one of these days whenever he gives permission. But just wanted to let y'all know that the House did win.
Anyone else? Welcome and honoring. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction of resolutions.
Lear Lambert, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, that all resolutions properly filed be introduced pursuant to Rule number 17 and placed on the consent calendar, referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate joint resolutions congratulatory and memorializing.
Lear Lambert, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, that all Senate joint resolutions congratulatory and memorializing line that has to be placed on the consent calendar pursuant to Rule number 17.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Resolutions lying over.
Lear Lambert, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, that all resolutions lined over be referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction of bills, Senate bills on first consideration.
Lear Lambert, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, with the Senate bills 22, 27, 68, 301, 317, 429, 466, 496, 537, 591, 648, 753, 782, 817, 871, 1146, and 1336, transmitted by the Senate, be held on the desk pending third consideration of the companion House bills.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate bills on second consideration, House bills on second consideration.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that House Bills 1,571 through 1,573 be passed on second consideration and be held on the desk or referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Petitions and memorials, reports from standing committees, reports from select committees, calendars. Mr. Speaker, the House has a consent calendar.
Chairman Zachary, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of the consent calendar on third and final consideration, keeping with Rule 50.
Gentleman moves passage of the consent calendar, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, any objections been filed?
Mr. Speaker, item 5, House Bill 312 has been objected to by Chairman Clemens. Item 8, House Bill 1561 has also been objected to by Chairman Clemens.
Anyone seeking recognition on the consent calendar? Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After consulting with leadership, I would like all members voting in the affirmative on items number 24 through 31 be listed as co-prime sponsors with the Davis County delegation listed first.
Without objection, exclusion is duly noted. Anyone else seeking recognition on the consent calendar? Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On item 14, item 15. Item 14 and 15. All those. All right. Leave it at that.
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Speaker, thank you. Item 14 and 15, all those voting in an affirmative, Shelby County, just Shelby County, co-prime sponsors.
Without objection, exclusion is duly noted. Anyone else seeking recognition on the consent calendar? Seeing none, we're voting on the consent calendar. All members in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? We're working on it. Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 94, no nays.
Having received the constitutional majority, I declare consent calendar passed without objection. The motion for reconsider is tabled. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the House has a regular calendar.
Call it first bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Joint Resolution 493.
Leader Camper, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, after consulting with Representative Jones, we're going to roll this 1 week.
Without objection, roll one week. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 395 by Representative Capley and others relative to possession of firearms. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Capley, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 0494.
Representative Capley moves substitute and conform to Senate Bill 494 without objection. So ordered. Representative Capley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 494 on third and final consideration.
Representative Capley moves passage of Senate Bill 494 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Ms. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Capley, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a bill that was brought to me by the TWRA. Simply cleans up the code to make sure that those individuals that are enjoying the great outdoors aren't breaking the law based on a technicality. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Capley renews this motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 494 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 82, 10 nays, 1 present, not voting.
Senate Bill 494 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The most reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1070 by Representative Carringer and others relative to unmanned aircraft. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Carringer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 0776.
Representative Carringer moves substitute and conform to Senate Bill 776, properly seconded without objection. So ordered. Representative Carringer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 0776 on third and final consideration.
Representative Carringer moves passage of Senate Bill 776 on third and final consideration, properly seconded. Ms. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House State Government Committee Amendment number 1, Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Keesling, you recognize.
Thank you. Thank you, Speaker. The amendment is the same as the Senate amendment. We move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendment.
Representative Carringer, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 776 is to prohibit local governments from purchasing drones from manufacturers with ties to the Chinese government or other agencies that may inappropriately monitor U.S. citizens using spyware. In 2019, the John S. McCain National Defense Act empowered the federal government to prohibit Department of Defense from purchasing certain drones. Specifically, it prohibits the department from purchasing drones made in China, Russia, or other adversary countries. This legislation makes sure that the local agencies using the same standards to best use technology to help first responders do their jobs while protecting the privacy of U.S. citizens. And therefore, this is what this bill does, and I will renew my motion.
Representative Carringer renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor, I just have one question, and pardon me if you already covered this in your brief statement. Would this prohibit or existing drones and existing equipment that law enforcement has already purchased and is using, would they have to get rid of that if this bill passes?
Representative Carringer.
Very good question. And yes, that has already been addressed. We have an amendment on that where the local law enforcement's, what they have right now, they are grandfathered in.
Representative Sparks.
Thank you, Speaker. My question was just answered. Thank you.
Representative Freeman.
Thank you. And I didn't hear this. This didn't come through any of my committees, so I'm just kind of curious. So is this any drone that is connected to the internet that can spy, or is it just any drone, even if it's just like a dumb camera on a drone?
Representative Carringer.
The bill says this legislation is to prohibit local governments from purchasing drones from manufacturers with ties to Chinese government.
Representative Freeman.
I'm good.
All right. Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 776, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member cast a vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Cheryl, aye. Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 89, no nays, 3 present, not voting.
Senate Bill 776, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 706 by Chairman Doggett relative to reemployment after retirement.
Chairman Doggett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 706 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Doggett moves passage, Bobby seconded. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House State Government Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Keesling, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Amendment 1 does rewrite the bill. We'll defer to Chairman Doggett for further explanation. We move to adopt.
Chairman Keesling moves adoption of amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Doggett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What we're doing is seeking to look at the return to work provisions for law enforcement. Currently, it's set to sunset this year. We're changing some things. Law enforcement that have been retired will be able to return to work after 60 days of retirement. versus the time that we have now. They'll also be able to receive 100% of the compensation, all while able to receive 70% of their retirement funds. And I renew my motion.
Chairman Doggett renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 706 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 94, no nays.
House Bill 706 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 529 by Representative Slater and others relative to educator licensure. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Slater, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 744.
Representative Slater moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 744, probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Slater.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 744 on third and final consideration.
Representative Slater moves passage of Senate Bill 744 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Education Administration Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt and defer to the sponsor for explanation.
Chairman White moves adoption of House Amendment number 1, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of adoption of House Amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Slater, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill will make the revocation of a teacher's license automatic when an individual commits a crime and surrenders his or her license as part of a plea agreement. Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Slater renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. We're voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 744 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. All those opposed, vote no. As every member votes, as any member change your vote. Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 93, no nays.
Senate Bill 744 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 461 by Representative Slater and others relative to parental rights. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Slater, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 537.
Representative Slater moves substitute and conform to Senate Bill 537, probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Slater.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 537 on third and final consideration.
Representative Slater moves passage of Senate Bill 537 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Civil Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Slater, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As amended, this bill allows the court to consider as additional grounds for termination of parental rights a parent confined for 6 or more years in a correctional facility. Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Slater renews this motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Parkinson.
Mr. Speaker, I think I might be out of order, but what's the last bill, his first bill?
Representative Slater.
Yes, it was.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just was wondering how he got by like that. He's pretty smooth. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. We're all those in favor of Senate Bill 537, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 77, 15 nays.
Senate Bill 537 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 459 by Representative Slater relative to individuals prohibited from employment with an educational entity. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Slater, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 743.
Representative Slater moves substitute form Senate Bill 743 without objection. So ordered. Representative Slater.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 743 on third and final consideration.
Representative Slater moves passage of Senate Bill 743 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Slater, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill will keep criminals out of the classroom. The State Board of Education is responsible for issuing, denying, and revoking educator licenses. The board is preventing those guilty of certain crimes from obtaining licenses and permits using current state board rules. This bill will codify this practice. Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Slater renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 743, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member casts a vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote. Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 93, no nays.
Senate Bill 743, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed. Without objection, the motion reconsiders table. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Senate Bill 93 by Representative Parkinson relative to eyelash services. Mr. Speaker, it was previously considered and reset for today's regular calendar.
Representative Parkinson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Eyelashing is a billion-dollar business. The lash extension market was valued at $1.36 billion in 2020. What this bill does is it allows for freestanding schools for lash techs. Students will go to school for 300 hours to become a lash tech. It allows for apprenticeship programs, makes the tuition fees exponentially lower. With that, Mr. Speaker, I move passage for Senate Bill 93 on third and final consideration.
Representative Parkinson renews his motion for passage of Senate Bill 93 on third and final consideration. Properly seconded. Any discussion on the bill? Any discussion on the bill? Sorry. Yep, Representative Williams.
Thank you. Representative Parkinson, just want to say thank you for this bill. I'm going to be voting for your bill today just because you were such a gentleman the other day, even though I can't stand it. But thank you. No, I'm just kidding. I actually better understand your bill today. Just want to tell you thanks for the bill. Thank you.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Look at God. Won't he do it?
All right, Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to rise in solidarity for all women that have eyelashes, that need this service. We're so grateful that you brought this bill to us today. Thank you, sir.
All right, any further discussion? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 93, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member votes, any member wish to change your vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 67, 15 nays, 7 present, not voting.
Senate Bill 93, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reconsiders table. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 535 by Representative Cochran and others relative to restitution. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Leader Cochran, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 442.
Leader Cochran moves substitute and conform to Senate Bill 442. Probably second without objection. So ordered. Leader Cochran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 442 on third and final consideration.
Leader Cochran moves passage of Senate Bill 442 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Gentleman Holsey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment's in the Senate bill. Therefore, I move to withdraw House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment 1.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Leader Cochran, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill is adding a portion to something that we passed last year. We passed a law that essentially says that a drunk driver is responsible for child support if he or she takes the life of a parent. This bill will amend Bentley's law, which we passed last year, to say that the family can choose to convert the criminal judgment for child support into a civil judgment. With that, I will yield any questions. I renew my motion.
Leader Cochran renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 442, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 91, no nays.
Senate Bill 442, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 296 by Representative Freeman and others relative to inspectors.
Representative Freeman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 296 on third and final consideration.
Representative Freeman moves passage. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Commerce Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment is replaced by amendment number 3, so I'm going to move to withdraw this one.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Commerce Committee Amendment number 2.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment allows municipal or county inspectors to perform field inspections as of the date of their employment, and we move to adopt this one.
Chairman Vaughn moves adoption of amendment number 2, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 2 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Commerce Committee Amendment number 3.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, sir. And for the hat trick, this amendment allows engineers registered in accordance with current law and certified by Electrical Codes Council to perform inspections and clarifies that registration and review process with the local government and state fire marshal. Also, sir, this amendment allows licensed electrical engineers to perform electrical inspections immediately within Davidson County. I move to adopt.
Chairman Vaughn moves adoption of amendment number 3, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 3 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Freeman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the chairman just described exactly what the bill does, so I renew my motion.
Representative Freeman renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 296 as amended vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, the same member which change their vote. Boyd's aye. Lamberth aye. Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 91, no nays.
House Bill 296, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed by objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 786 by Representative Fritz relative to occupational teacher's license.
Representative Fritz, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of HB 786 on third and final consideration.
Representative Fritz moves passage, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Education Administration Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment rewrites the bill, so I move to adopt and defer to the sponsor for explanation.
Chairman White moves adoption of amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Fritz, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 786 will allow honorably discharged veterans to use their occupational training that they received in the military to qualify for temporary teaching permits in occupational fields. It is important to note that this training experience must align with the qualifications currently required to receive temporary teaching permit as determined by the State Board of Education. Why is this needed? School districts are experiencing an increased need for individuals who are qualified to teach in high-need areas such as career and technical courses. Schools are struggling to fill these vacant teaching positions. This situation is particularly concerning when you consider the aging of our teacher population. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, the average age of our teachers in Tennessee is just over 42, but only 17% of our teachers are under 30. According to Tennessee Treasury, 8,000 teachers were eligible to retire in June of 2022, which is 13% increase over the previous year. Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Fritz renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Sparks.
Just want to thank you for this bill. It's a good bill. We're having a shortage of teachers, as y'all know. Sadly, the media won't even cover this piece of legislation, and it's awesome. Just want to tell you thank you, sir.
Representative Fritz.
Thank you. I renew my motion.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 786 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 90, no nays.
House Bill 786, having received a constitutional majority, hereby declared passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 830 by Representative Gillespie and others relative to bail for certain offenses.
Representative Gillespie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 830 on third and final consideration.
Representative Gillespie moves passage. Probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Holsey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment makes the bill. Therefore, I move adoption of House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment 1 and defer to the sponsor for explanation.
Chairman Holsey moves adoption of amendment number 1. Probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Gillespie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What this bill does is it attempts to correct what we keep on hearing in the Memphis area as our revolving door in our criminal justice system. What it will simply do is if you are arrested for a Class A or B felony or for any form of aggravated assault or domestic assault, a elected judge and an elected judge only will be the one that determines your bail. What this bill also does is if you are already out on bail and are rearrested for another offense, then new bail will be required to be set. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Gillespie renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative, you said an elected judge. If I'm a person that was appointed to a position due to a vacancy or something like that, would I still be able to serve as judge in that in those proceedings?
Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Leader, yes. So this would specifically allow a general sessions judge, a criminal court judge, and if applicable, a circuit court judge. And there is a provision in the bill from other parts of the code that says if you're in an appointed, there's a provision for that. So that would be allowed in that temporary basis, if that's what you're asking.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is. And so we are also saying that if you are a magistrate, you will not be able to serve in this capacity.
Representative Gillespie.
Yes, ma'am.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative.
Thank you. Representative Dixie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative, can you explain to me the current process, how it works right now?
Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every county, from what I understand it, or every judicial district can do it slightly different. I know where I come from, we're having a big problem with the judicial commissioners that are appointed that are, I mean, they got a tough job and they got a lot being thrown at them. And I just think that these cases that are slipping through the cracks require a little bit more deliberation and someone that's totally accountable to the actual voters by direct election. So that's where I'm coming from.
Representative Dixie.
I understand you said that's where you're coming from. So what you're saying is you really don't understand how it works right now. So, but my question to you is, by keeping people in to see an elected official, they're going to have to spend the night in jail if it happens over the weekend, or they have to wait to the next docket in order for this to happen, correct?
Representative Gillespie.
That's a case by case. There's certain counties that have judges there that are all day. There are other judges that have night court or other forms of that. I would strongly be encouraged to bring back night courts, but that's not a decision that I can make.
Representative Dixie.
So currently, if someone were to get arrested at 10 o'clock in the morning, they get taken to the jail on one of these offenses, the docket has already been set for the day. So a judge is not going to be able to see them that day. They're not going to be able to be seen until the next available docket. So is the goal of this bill to keep people in jail longer? I don't understand what the intent is behind this.
Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The goal is, first of all, we're talking about murderers, child rapists, kidnappers, carjackers with weapons. Yes, the intent is to keep them in jail. You're absolutely correct. Those are people that do serve a public menace to our society. They've committed or have been arrested of a crime. Probable cause has played its course. So in my community, yes, because that is part of the issue that we're facing. We're having a lot of people that are being released on bail and committing other heinous acts of violence and crimes against peoples that I represent. So thank you, sir, for making my point.
Representative Dixie.
I didn't make your point, and you didn't make your point either. But the point, what I'm trying to explain to you is that I think people will stay in jail longer on this. And also, you took some of the most egregious offenses. You said domestic assault, and we all know that people have been arrested for domestic assault just for arguing with one another, simply just for arguing with one another. So I think that in order to make this bill a little more applicable or intensive for everyone that's involved, it would be hard to just blanket and put domestic assault, aggravated assault, as if my seatmate and I got into an argument and I picked up this pen and said, I want to stab you. I didn't do it, but I said I was going to do it. I'll be charged with aggravated assault. Yes, it would be. Anyway, that's my question. I just want to know your intent of the bill, but also an unintended consequence may be that people will stay in jail longer without bail.
Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will say that as the bill was written, it's aggravated assault and felony domestic assault. So these are, my understanding, not a verbal threat. So.
All right. Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Speaker. To the sponsor, I thought maybe you were going to get my question answered when Representative Dixie was asking. On indigency, if you can't afford the bail, does your bill complicate that process?
Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do not believe we are changing any. That has not been part of the topic of discussion.
Representative Hardaway.
All right, so if you're indigent, then you're not adding the requirement that those who are indigent would be put in a position to where if they couldn't get it from a fund, that they would be held in jail.
Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my understanding that if you're a billionaire or have no money at all and you commit one of these crimes, bail will be set by an elected judge.
Representative Hardaway.
All right, thank you. And Representative Dixie, I believe, was asking, and I'm going to try to ask it a different way. There is no significant fiscal memo, so there's no allowance for the additional jail time for certain individuals, defendants, and is there a plan that's part of this that deals with putting more judges and the other necessary support personnel on the bench? You started to address that, but you didn't go into detail. Will we have additional resources?
Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This does not get into any of those resources, but as I said earlier, I would be in full support of taking another visit, maybe in certain places, adding more judges down the line.
Representative Hardaway.
All right. Do you see this as, and I'm trying to figure out whether we need to get to those additional resources this session so we don't jam up, create a bottleneck in the court system. I had some of my judges suggest that might happen without additional resources.
Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have been reached out to, and I have reached out to several judges, whether at general session, criminal, or circuit, and just asked for different people's opinions. And I've not yet had someone say that what you're talking about.
Representative Hardaway.
Okay, I'll be happy to get with you later, and we'll talk to some Shelby County criminal court judges and general session judges who do have concerns. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Clemens. Pass. Representative Gant. At Martins.
Question on the bill.
Question been called. Any objection? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor of House Bill 830 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 69, 20 nays, 3 present, not voting.
House Bill 830 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Motion to reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1181 by Representative Garrett relative to commerce.
Representative Garrett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1181 on third and final consideration.
Representative Garrett moves passage, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Commerce Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment rewrites the bill. Therefore, I move to adopt. And I'm going to defer to the sponsor for a thorough yet still brief explanation. Thank you.
Chairman Vaughn moves adoption of amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Garrett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is the Tennessee Information Protection Act, and this is a piece of legislation that I've been working on for 2.5 to 3 years. And it stems from a situation that actually happened to me as I was taking care of a young fellow that his parents were kind of in a bad situation. He was living with us, and he was on Instagram, and he was emailing back and forth with someone through Instagram, and they actually received his information. And that person was posing as a young lady close to his age and asking him for pictures of whatnot of a nature that I can only leave to your imagination. And we actually investigated what had happened. They had actually realized where he was living, where he went to school, and he was actually living with me. So through the IP address, through what information he provided through Instagram, led this person to potentially abuse this particular child. And I realized quite quickly that there was no mechanism out in the internet to protect someone's virtual you. So as you go and connect, travel the internet, the information that you provide, there's no space that protects this. So what this information does, your IP address, your biometric data, your email address, all information that Google, that TikTok, that Instagram collects on you as you provide it, this provides a mechanism where they have to protect that data. They have to make sure you are aware of what they do with that data. They have to make you aware if they sell the data. They have to give you a copy of the data if you request that data to be deleted. This legislation makes them delete that information. So with that, Mr. Speaker, even though I know this legislation is quite lengthy, I hope you can understand that this space needs to be protected to protect our children and protect your information as you travel the internet. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I'll be glad to take any questions. Otherwise, I renew my motion.
Representative Garrett renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1181 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Close call, aye. Barrett, aye. Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 90, no nays.
House Bill 1181 having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Motion to reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1569 by Chairman Grills and others relative to Obion County.
Representative Grills, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage on HB 1569 on third and final consideration.
Representative Grills moves passage by second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Local Government Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Crawford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment makes the bill. I move to adopt and defer to the sponsor for further explanation.
Chairman Crawford moves adoption of amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Grills, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill gives the Obion County Commission the authority to dissolve their current road commission. With that, I renew my motion.
Representative Grills renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Oh, Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative, for the bill. You said it's giving them the authority to do it. The state is not mandating that they do anything.
Representative Grills.
You are correct.
Leader Camper.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none, all those in favor of House Bill 1569 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Cheryl, aye. Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 92, no nays.
House Bill 1569 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1565 by Representative Hale, relative to the charter of the city of Smithville.
Representative Hell, you're recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker. Move pass 1565 on third final.
Representative Hell moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Hell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a local bill for the city of Smithville. Changes. Change. Let's try this. There we go. Section 1 changes during a 10-year period of a felony conviction can continue to work, but someone wouldn't be able to hold an office during that 10-year period. Section 2 reduces the voting requirement to appoint or remove officers or department heads from 2/3 to a simple majority. And then Section 3 extends the ability to make appointments, promotions, transfers to the mayor or city administrator. I renew my motion.
Representative Hell renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Dixie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Currently, if you have a felony right now, how long do you have to wait before you can get that expunged?
Representative Hell.
I'm not sure. This is a Smithville charter change. So what they're doing is during that 10-year period, you can still hold a job, but you're not able to hold an office during that 10-year period.
Representative Dixie.
After that 10-year period, even if you are convicted of a felony, after the 10-year period, you can hold an office.
Representative Hell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With this change, they would be able to.
Representative Dixie.
So I want to be clear on what I'm hearing. You can still have a felony on your record, hold a public office, and still have a job, but this would only apply to Smithville?
Representative Hell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is only in Smithville. This is a charter change for the city of Smithville.
Representative Dixie.
So are there a shortage of available people that can fill these positions, that we have to have felons for these positions in Smithville?
Representative Hell.
I'm not sure. This is just something that the city wanted to do, that they've asked us to do.
Representative Dixie.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any objection to the question? See none. All those in favor of House Bill 1565 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Sapiki aye, Martin aye, Grills aye. Martin Hamilton. Let the journal reflect Representative Kumar is excused. Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 76, 12 nays, 6 present on voting.
House Bill 1565 having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Bob, next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 885 by Chairman Hawk and others relative to healthcare services.
Chairman Hawk, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move passage of House Bill 885 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Hawk moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Insurance Committee Amendment number 1.
Vice Chairman Martin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment rewrites the bill. Move to adopt and defer to sponsor for further explanation.
Vice Chairman Martin moves adoption of amendment number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt it. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Hawk, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill has been through several years of discussion and debate between insurance payers and healthcare providers. This bill will ultimately create more timely care for our citizens. It requires clinical criteria that prior authorizations are judged according to be consistent with current national medical standards, and any such review must be decided by a licensed physician professional in the same or similar specialty. This bill also sets forth timeframes for which prior authorizations must be decided, including the following. Non-urgent decisions must be decided within 17 days. Urgent care decisions must be decided within 72 hours. The bill as amended will only apply to prescription drugs if prescriptions for chronic conditions. As for chronic conditions, all prior authorizations will last for 6 months unless the clinical criteria for that treatment states otherwise. Prior authorizations may be required for inpatient services for both medical and behavioral health benefits. Any changes to prior authorization standards must be updated 60 days before the new standards go into place. And lastly, requires the insurance company that provides a prior authorization may not refuse to pay for healthcare service at a later date unless the person is not covered or fraud was involved at the time of service. With that explanation, Speaker and members, I renew my motion.
Chairman Hawk renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor Yield.
Yes,
Chairman
sir.
Hawk. Yes, sir. Representative
Uh, does this bill, because I've heard what you read, but does this bill have anything to do with duplicate services in any way? And paying for duplicate services, TennCare paying for them?
Chairman Hawk.
No, sir, it does not.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you. I was just wondering that based on what you said, if a person is getting services, maybe one place, and then if go back and get it from some other place, would it require some kind of reporting for duplicated services? That's what I was wondering about.
Chairman Hawk.
Representative Shaw, I'm not aware of anything. If someone has one procedure, are you saying if they have a procedure done a second time? If it is medically needed and the procedure is required again, then there will be a process to go through for prior authorization to go through all that list of 7 items I just told you. So if a procedure needs to occur a second time, then you go back through all the steps. If the first time it didn't take, or the second time there's something that is still ailing the individual, you would go through those steps once again, sir.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objections to the question? Seeing none, all those in favor, House Bill 885 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, as every member change your vote. Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 94, no nays, 1 present, not voting.
House Bill 885 having received the constitutional majority, everybody declare it passed by objection. Most for serious table. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 798 by Deputy Speaker Johnson relative to utilities. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Deputy Speaker Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 782.
Deputy Speaker Johnson moves substitute form Senate Bill 782, probably seconded without objection. So ordered. Deputy Speaker Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 782 on third and final consideration.
Deputy Speaker Johnson moves passage of Senate Bill 782 on third and final consideration, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Commerce Committee Amendment number 1, Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Deputy Speaker Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 798, no, Senate Bill 782 expands the Executive Committee of the Underground Damage Advisory Committee from 3 members to 5 members. I renew my motion.
Deputy Speaker Johnson renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 782 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, we wish to change your vote. Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 95, no nays.
Senate Bill 782 has received a constitutional majority. Everybody declare it passed without objection. Most reconsider table. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 369 by Leader Love, relative to higher education.
President Love, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 0369 on third and final consideration.
Representative Love moves passage. Following second, Ms. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Education Administration Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment does rewrite the bill, so I move to adopt and defer to the sponsor for further explanation.
Chairman White moves adoption of amendment number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Love, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, we oftentimes talk about the importance of giving people an opportunity when they've been incarcerated to get a college education. We have a program here in Tennessee called the Higher Education Initiative that actually provides free college courses in the prison where they're located. This particular piece of legislation will simply say that when a person is released from incarceration and they apply to continue to go to college after their incarceration, on the application, a public institution of higher education that requires a criminal history will develop and implement an additional review process for applicants with a criminal history. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Love renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor, I didn't get a chance to talk about this with you before, but I'm just curious. In the unfortunate circumstances, if someone were to have been convicted of, say, rape, how are we addressing them living in a college dorm situation if we're removing that background check?
Representative Love.
Thank you, sponsor. We're not removing the background check. This amendment rewrites the bill, and it gets rid of the original language in the bill, which removed the background check removal. Now what it says is a public institution of higher education that requires an applicant's criminal history for purpose of undergraduate admission shall develop and implement an additional review process for applicants with a criminal history. And so I know that we had concerns about removing that question, and we had the amendment to say, just create a different review process. It doesn't say that you will not require information about their criminal history, but simply says in the consideration of their application, create a different process to review it, but not necessarily remove the question about that.
Representative Towns, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Sponsor yield.
Representative Love.
Yes, sir.
Representative Towns.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Representative, I like the bill, some tenets of the bill. I tried to do something similar to this years ago, but it was while they were incarcerated. They would get their education, because certainly all of us would want to ensure that once someone is transitioned out of that facility, that they can hit the ground, trying to do something to be productive. Now, it's not going to be 100% like it's not with everything that we do. But I would think that if a man or a woman decides to attend school, that something good is going on in their heads, trying to make a transition. So I'm hoping that the bill gets enough positivity so we can actually start on it. If it needs to be improved, maybe we can improve it. But I would really love to see it start earlier. I would really love to see it start earlier while they're in the situation, that critical situation. But thank you for the bill, sir.
Representative Love.
Thank you, Speaker. And to your point, Representative Towns, one of the wonderful programs we do have in Tennessee, the Higher Education Initiative, actually has a 0 recidivism rate if persons complete their program. And so they provide education in the prisons for persons. And the beauty of it is if a person goes all the way through their program, they don't recidivate. And so our goal now is to say if a person is released from incarceration and then they have the chance to continue their education afterwards, this will allow, again, them to continue that process if the college will then admit them. But it's just a process to reduce some of the confusion around it.
Representative Love, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know members may be concerned about the posture of this bill in the Senate. When Senator Agberry was over here on the floor, I asked her about that. They are planning to reconsider the action on that particular bill and then take the amendment on there. If members are comfortable.
Representative Love.
Thank you. I don't mind rolling it 2 weeks to make, I see a lot of heads nodding, so I'll roll my bill 2 weeks. Thank you, if that's
Yes.
in proper form.
Yes, sir. All right, roll 2 weeks. Call next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 555 by Chair Lady Littleton relative to victims of human trafficking.
Chair Lady Littleton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 555 on third and final consideration.
Chair Lady Littleton moves passage, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Holsey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment adds victims of human trafficking to the list of victims who may delay reporting for good cause. And with that explanation, I move adoption of House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment 1.
Chairman Holsey moves adoption amendment number 1, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt the next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendment.
Chair Lady Littleton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill was drafted by the Treasurer's Office after multiple conversations to allow victims of human trafficking the same opportunities as other victims to assess the Criminal Injuries Compensation Fund for pain and suffering. With that, I renew my motion, Mr. Speaker.
Chair Lady Littleton renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 555 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Garrett, aye. Barrett, aye. Lambert, aye. Hardaway, aye. Barrett, aye. Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 96, no nays.
House Bill 555 having received constitutional majority, everybody declare passed without objection. Most for serious table. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 23 by Chairman Moon and others relative to public meetings. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Moon, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform Senate Bill 27.
Chairman Moon moves substitute and conform Senate Bill 27, probably second without objection. So ordered. Chairman Moon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 27 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Moon moves passage of Senate Bill 27 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House State Government Committee Amendment Number 1. Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Keisling, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Amendment 1 is the same as Senate Amendment. We move to withdraw.
Without objection, Amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Moon, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill as amended requires a local government legislative body to make available to the public the agenda of an upcoming regular meeting at least 48 hours prior to the meeting. Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Moon renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor vote aye when the bell rings. All those opposed vote no. As everyone voted, anyone else just change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 92, no nays.
Senate Bill 27, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion reeks series table. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 772 by Chairman Rudd relative to elections.
Chairman Rudd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of HB 0772 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Rudd moves passage, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Local Government Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Crawford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment makes the bill. I move to adopt and defer to the sponsor for further explanation.
Chairman Crawford moves adoption of amendment number 1, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt the next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendment.
Chairman Rudd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What this bill does, this is brought to me by the Secretary of State to cover 2 areas. The first is there is only one primary candidate selection process that is not currently controlled by each respective state party. And this would transfer that authority of the Secretary of State to approve presidential candidates for the Democrat and Republican primaries to their respective party chairs and their executive committees. And as far as I know, both party chairs are in favor of this. And that's what the bill does, Mr. Speaker. Section 3, as you recall last year, we passed ethics legislation that requires those members of the General Assembly and employees to disclose if they were contracted to work for campaigns. This would extend that to the, in a much more limited form, to the State Election Commission, that if they are under contract and working for a political campaign for compensation, that they have 30 days from signing that contract to let the State Election Commission know. If they violate that 30 days, then the State General Assembly could remove them from the Election Commission. I think it's only fair that someone's overseeing our elections, if they're getting paid by an election that they're participating in, that they should at least let us know. It does not remove them from the Election Commission, but it requires them to let us know. And that's what the bill does, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Representative Rudd renews his motion. Any discussion? Chairman Clemens, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Chairman, can you explain to us what the process is for certification of a candidate for the primary ballot?
Representative Rudd.
Currently, the presidential preference primaries are simply approved by the Secretary of State to make sure that they're of age and that they meet the requirements. They don't put any partisan, like bona fide status, that's under the current law. So this would transfer that like every other election from school board all the way up to state legislature, county commission, county offices, us, Congress, Senate, all has to be approved under the bona fide status of the respective party. I don't know about the Democrat Party, but the state Republican Party said that under presidential candidates, they would apply the bona fide status that the RNC uses, not the state party for a presidential candidate, since so many candidates would be running from out of state. So that's what that does right now. The Secretary of State right now is not as partisan or requires partisan. They require the certain number of signatures and they're the right legal age and they can run in that primary. This would simply transfer that authority to each respective party as it is for every other single primary election.
Chairman Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think we would all agree that the President of the United States rises to another level above any other election. And so my concern is allowing a political decision to be made rather than an independent decision by someone that this body elects in compliance with the law. Are the statewide political party chairman going to be given training, and to who are they going to be beholden in making this decision? Because I really have a concern that they could have, just in your worst case scenario, they could have a preference as far as a primary candidate, or may have a bone to pick with somebody. Some of this statewide political party stuff gets a little heated sometimes. So are you not concerned that they may make a political decision or make some strategic decision with regard to kicking somebody off a primary ballot?
Representative Rudd.
No, I don't think that's an issue because right now that could extend to any primary at either party, down ballot, at the local, or up state. That's why each party's state executive committee sets the rules and sets the qualifications that state party chairs have to abide by.
Chairman Clemens.
And thank you, Mr. Speaker, have we experienced anything in recent times that there has been a problem with the Secretary of State, or a party has challenged the Secretary of State's decision-making in this regard, that they've taken issue with for some reason, that Secretary of State wasn't doing his job adequately? What was the impetus behind this?
Representative Rudd.
As far as the emphasis, I wasn't a part of any of that discussions. Again, this is brought to me by the Secretary of State, and he's fine signing this authority over to each party, respective state party. I think it's, as I said earlier, this is the only primary in the entire state at any level that is not up to the approval of the state parties. And each state party has their own respective rules. I trust my state party and the chairman to do the right thing and to vet candidates, and I would hope that you do on the Democrat side. But again, this is the only one, and a nonpartisan individual should not be deciding about the qualifications or the certification of a primary.
Chairman Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. Any objections to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 772 as amended vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Aye 73, 22 nays, one present, not voting.
House Bill 772, and received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed by objection. Most reconsidered table. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 919, by Chair Lady Rudder, relative to utilities. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill's on the desk.
Chair Lady Rudder, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1102.
Chair Lady Rudder moves to substitute and form Senate Bill 1102, probably second without objection. So ordered. Chair Lady Rudder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1102 on third and final consideration.
Chair Lady Rudder moves passage of Senate Bill 1102 on third and final consideration. Properly second. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Commerce Committee Amendment number 1, Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And since it's the same as the Senate amendment, we will move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chair Lady Rudder, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Chair Lady Rudder renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you, Representative Rudder. Does this bill apply to members that have been appointed to utility districts or just the ones that are elected?
Chair Lady Rudder.
Excuse me, yes. This bill just applies to Franklin County. It's a local bill for commissioners for a multi-county utility district. It prohibits them from serving more than two consecutive terms. They needed to serve more than 2 consecutive terms. They can't find enough people to serve. That's all it does.
Representative Warner. Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1102 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As there a member vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 95, no nays.
Senate Bill 1102, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed by objection. Most reconsidered table. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1560 by Representative Wright, relative to the ownership and operation of a nonprofit hospital by Blount County, Tennessee.
Representative Wright, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1560 on third and final consideration.
Representative Wright moves passage. Probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Wright, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Private Acts of 1945, Chapter 187, authorized and empowered Blount County to build, purchase, own, and/or operate and maintain a nonprofit general hospital. This amendment updates words used in that private act of 1945, changing such things as quarterly county court to county commission, and recognize that a handshake agreement in 1945 was an agreement, but going forward in today's world, a written agreement is now necessary. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Wright renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1560 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Ritchie, aye. Hardaway's an aye. Jones and aye. Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Aye 73, 13 nays, 6 present not voted.
House Bill 1560 having received a constitutional majority, everybody declare passed by objection. Most read series table. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1295 by Leader Camper, relative to education.
Leader Camper, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for passage of House Bill 1295 on third and final consideration.
Leader Camper moves passage. Popular secretary, Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Education Administration Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment rewrites the bill, so I move to adopt and defer to the sponsor for explanation.
Chairman White moves adoption of amendment number 1. Properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt the next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Leader Camper, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members, this bill as amended would require the Department of Education to conduct a study of best practices in other states that we can use for ninth grade on-track indicators in our state in our state accountability systems to prevent students from dropping out of high school. The study must include, but is not limited to, researching how states define on-track high school success, develop specific indicators to identify students at risk of dropping out, develop and use statewide dropout early warning systems in middle and high school grades, utilize methods to publicly I'm like, what's the name? I can't get it out. Utilize methods to publicly report relevant data on-track high school success indicators. Secondly, the bill will require the Department of Education to submit a report on these outcomes of the study to the Education Committee in both the House and the Senate by January 31st, 2024. Lastly, the bill will require the Department of Education to make this report available on the department's website. If you notice, the fiscal note is not significant because the department has said that they can do this study with their existing resources. I've been to several high schools to look at some of the ninth grade academies and some of the things that they're doing, and it's very innovative, some of the stuff that these schools are doing. But it's still something happening that's stopping our kids from graduating. Something is happening that's stopping them from getting from ninth grade to 12th grade. What this would do is try to have us look across the country at what is being done correctly that we could adopt to provide guidance, direction to our students to help them graduate. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Leader Camper renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none, all those in favor of House Bill 1295 as amended vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Hemworth, aye. Zachary, aye. Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 81, no nays, 11 present not voting.
House Bill 1295, I received a constitutional majority, hereby declare passed without objection. Most read serious table. Call next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 864 by Chairman Crawford and others relative to local government.
Chairman Crawford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 864 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Crawford moves passage, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call it first amendment.
House Local Government Committee Amendment Number 1.
Vice Chairman Wright, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment makes the bill. I move to adopt and defer to the sponsor for further explanation.
Vice Chairman Wright moves adoption amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Crawford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This change into the language is basically changing two words. And this is to match up with the Metro's charter. We're changing or adding the word demolition and replacement. It simply means that something is removed at the fairgrounds, it must be replaced. It has to be used for the same purpose as it was when they started. 864 serves as a clarifying language to allow Metro Council to approve improvements to the historic Nashville Fairground by a simple majority vote. This legislation will allow for events such as NASCAR, different music events, any entertainment that it would be held on the fairgrounds property. That's what this bill does. I renew my motion.
Chairman Crawford renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 864 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Darby, aye. Lamberth, aye. Zachary, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 82, 10 nays, 2 present, not voting.
House Bill 864 having received a constitutional majority, hereby declare passed without objection. Most read serious table. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 632 by Representative Darby and others relative to convenient voting centers. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Darby, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to SB 0477.
Representative Darby moves substitute form Senate Bill 477, probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Darby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of SB 0477 on third and final consideration.
Representative Darby moves passage of Senate Bill 477 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Local Government Committee Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Crawford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment deletes the language of pilot programs prior to 2020. We move to adopt.
Chairman Crawford moves adoption of House Amendment Number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of adopting Amendment Number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment Number 1 filed as House Amendment 2.
Chairlady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to adopt and defer to the sponsor for an explanation.
Chairlady Hazelwood moves adoption Amendment Number 2, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of Amendment Number 2 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Darby, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 477 is a local bill that authorizes Henry County to participate in a pilot project to use convenient voting centers for local and state elections. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Darby renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Speaker. To the sponsor, will this require any reporting back to the state on the effectiveness, the efficiencies of the project?
Representative Darby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, sir, it will. And just, we're a rural area, and the county that I'm a part of, Weakley County, we started in 2020, and it's hard to put numbers on state elections with the national elections there because the voter turnout there may be different. Some are more polarized than others, but we've been about 6 points higher in the state average here since 2020.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing and analyzing that data. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objections to the question? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 477 As amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, any member wish to change their vote. Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 86, 6 nay, 2 present, not voting.
Senate Bill 477 having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 415 by Representative Davis relative to adult sexual assault response teams. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Davis, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 22.
Representative Davis moves substitute and form Senate Bill 22, properly seconded without objection. So ordered. Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 22 on third and final consideration.
Representative Davis moves passage of Senate Bill 22 on third and final consideration, properly seconded. Ms. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Holsey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment's in the Senate bill. Therefore, I move to withdraw House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment 1.
Without objection, Amendment Number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Ms. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Davis, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What this bill does, members, is that it forms a sexual assault response team. This is a specific intervention model that is focused on immediate and consistent response to sexual assault victims with the goal of implementing and maintaining a comprehensive, coordinated, trauma-informed, and victim-centered system of intervention and care with a commitment to systems change and continuous improvement. What the sexual assault team will do is help to increase interagency and intra-agency collaboration and coordination. It also helps to focus on improving the coordination of services, policies, and best practices between local agencies and also other experts in this field in a collaborative effort that utilizes existing or available resources and personnel. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Davis renews your motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 22 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member cast a vote? Any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 94, no nays.
Senate Bill 22 having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 315 by Chair Lady Hazelwood relative to intermediate care facilities for individuals with intellectual disabilities. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 267.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves substitute and form Senate Bill 267, properly seconded without objection. So ordered. Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 267 on third and final consideration.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves passage of Senate Bill 267 on third and final consideration, properly seconded. Ms. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment Number 1.
Vice Chairman Leatherwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment rewrites the bill, and I move to adopt and defer to the sponsor for further explanation.
Vice Chairman Leatherwood moves adoption of Amendment Number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of adoption of Amendment Number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Be adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is an administration bill that will help Tennessee as in teen care as we move to allow our dead individuals who are developmentally disabled to allow them choices between the intermediate care facilities that some of them now reside in and more home-based services. But it also protects those who would like to continue in that ICF facilities by maintaining we have a floor for the number of beds. But those organizations who no longer want to participate in those kind of programs can voluntarily give up those beds. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chair Lady Hazelwood renews your motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none, all those in favor of Senate Bill 267 as amended vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 96, no nays.
Senate Bill 267 having received a constitutional majority, hereby declare passed without objection. Most read series table. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1194 by Chairman Williams and others relative to Alzheimer's care. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Williams, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Substitute and conform to Senate Bill 678.
Chairman Williams moves substitute conform to Senate Bill 678, probably second without objection. So ordered. Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 678.
Chairman Williams moves passage of Senate Bill 678 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call it first amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Vice Chairman Leatherwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment is the same as the Senate amendment. I move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Williams, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members. This bill is a revision to last year's Colonel Thomas Bowden Act. It seeks to expand services for respite care for Alzheimer's families across the state, extends a pilot project for another year so that we can get these services to our communities so that we can report back here and see if we can keep those family members who are suffering from Alzheimer's in their homes longer. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Williams renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank you, sponsor, for bringing this. Thank you so much. If you don't mind, I'd like to sign on to that.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you, sir. Happy to.
Any further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 678, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 96, no nays.
Senate Bill 678 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed by objection. Most read series table. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that completes the regular calendar.
Call the first message, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the House has a message calendar. Item 1, House Bill 644 by Representative Bond. Mr. Speaker, on April 3rd, 2023, the Senate substituted House Bill 644 for Senate Bill 668, adopted Amendment 1, passed House Bill 644 as amended.
Representative Baum, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to concur with Senate Amendment number 1.
Representative Baum moves to concur in Senate Amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative, you're going to explain this amendment.
Representative Baum.
Pardon me?
Leader Camper.
Will you explain the amendment, please?
Representative Baum.
Yes, this is the financial literacy bill that calls for the treasurer and his office to examine the different financial literacy programs that are being used within the state of Tennessee and that are being used in other states to gauge which ones are the most effective. And the treasurer's office would like for the original bill to go a little bit further and allow them to do a little more analysis. And they put that amendment on the Senate side. And I agreed several weeks ago, because we had already passed the bill on the House side, that when they added those additional analyses that we would conform to the Senate side.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, sponsor. Does it require any reporting after that? I think it's a good bill. I was just curious what the changes were.
Representative Baum.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, there will be some reporting so that we can gauge what programs are most effective, and April will become Financial Literacy Month.
Leader Camper, we're good. Any further discussion? Representative, oh, no, all right. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Amendment 1, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change your vote? Boyd, aye. Haston, aye. Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 96, no nays.
Senate Amendment 1, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare concurred in without objection. Most read series table. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 988 by Representative Beck, relative to landlord and tenant. Mr. Speaker, on April 3rd, 2023, the Senate substituted House Bill 988 for Senate Bill 717, adopted Amendment 1, and passed House Bill 988 as amended.
Representative Beck, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The House version gave a 90-day notice. The Senate amendment is giving a 60-day notice. I move to non-concur with the Senate Amendment number 1.
Without objection, we non-concur. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1306 by Chairman Kumar and others relative to consumer protection. Mr. Speaker, on April 3rd, 2023, the Senate substituted House Bill 1306 for Senate Bill 667, adopted Amendment 1 and passed House Bill 1306 as amended.
Chairman Kumar, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this amendment is about the parking bill, about when a place accepts only one method of payment, that they would make an alternative available. And one of those alternatives is that they would give a means of being able to call the business and give them your credit card to be able to pay for it. It clarifies the language in regards to that. Move to concur.
Chairman Kumar moves to concur in Senate Amendment number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Amendment number 1, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, as every member change your vote. Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 93, 2 nays.
Senate Amendment number 1, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare concurring without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1342 by Chairman Vaughn and others relative to economic and community development. Mr. Speaker, on April 3rd, 2023, the Senate substituted House Bill 1342 for Senate Bill 650, adopted Amendments 1 and 2, and passed House Bill 1342 as amended.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Senate has placed 2 amendments on this bill, one carving out the mega site in its entirety, the other putting size and time limit restraints on this bill. Therefore, sir, when it comes to concurrence, I say nay. I say not today, not tomorrow, not next week, sir. I say nay. I move to non-concur.
Out of order. All right. Without objection, we non-concur, nay today. All right. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that completes the message calendar.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Unfinished business.
Unfinished business. Lear Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After consultation with the Democratic leader, I move that Leader Camper be listed as first prime sponsor of House Bills 302, 303, 304, 305, 747, 748, 1234, 1235, 1236, 1237, 1238, 1239, 1474, 1255, 1293, 1339, 1472, 1473, 1510, and House Joint Resolutions 50 and 493.
You've heard the motion. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Representative Haston, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the rules be suspended for immediate consideration of SJR 585.
Mr. Clerk, read the caption.
Senate Joint Resolution 585 by Chairman Haston, a resolution to honor and commend Wayne Geralds for his contributions to the state of Tennessee as a champion fiddler.
You've heard the caption. Any objections? Without objection, the rules are suspended. Representative Haston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to concur to SJR 585.
Representative Haston moves to concur in Senate Joint Resolution 585, properly seconded. Any objection to the question? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. I declare concurring without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Let the journal reflect. Representative Johnson is on education, instruction, insurance, and criminal. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Announcements.
Announcements. Any announcements? Representative Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The House Local Government Committee will meet at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning instead of 1:30. Again, the local House Government Committee will meet at 9 a.m., House Hearing Room 1.
Representative Halsey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The House Criminal Justice Committee will meet to hear our final calendar tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. in House Hearing Room 1. 11 a.m. Hearing Room 1.
Representative White.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, the Education Administration Committee will meet this Wednesday at 1 o'clock in House Hearing Room 1.
Representative Bricken.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. During session, I received some sad news from Tullahoma. We lost a fine Christian lady named Linda Thomas, and y'all don't know her, but she's the mom of Russell Thomas, the executive director of the Alcoholic Beverage Control Commission, and mother-in-law of the director of our Sports Gambling Commission. Linda and her husband Doug are close friends of ours. Fine, wonderful Christian lady. And again, for a moment of silence for Linda and her family. Thank you, members.
Thank you. Further announcements? Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Parkinson and I are interested in forming a mental health issues caucus, and we would like to know if other members are also interested. If you're interested, please contact Representative Parkinson or myself. And we feel that there's a lot of work to be done on mental health issues, obviously, in the state of Tennessee. And we know that by working together, we can probably come up with some really great ideas. Thank you.
Representative Hammer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Didn't get a chance to make this announcement Thursday, but for those of you wondering about Tyler and how he's doing, I heard from Lisa, and he had a very successful procedure last week and is on the road to recovery. So thank God.
Representative Parks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A very important announcement will be forthcoming on Thursday from the Seersucker Caucus. Thank you.
Representative Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Earlier this morning, you received a letter from my attorney asking some questions that I want to get clarification on this House floor. That if I was to be reappointed as a member, would I be promptly sworn back in and restored to the same rights as every other member of this body? Before I was expelled, you shut off access to my ID badge. Will that be restored? You shut off access to the parking garage. Will that be restored? My email access has been cut off. Will that be restored? My healthcare benefits have been cut off. Will that be restored? And also, I was removed from all the committees I was a member of. Will that be restored? I hope to have an answer on this House floor, Mr. Speaker, for the sake of transparency.
Some of those questions are HR issues, which Representative McKenzie came up and asked about. As far as committees, has been the standard practice on both sides. If you are appointed, then a committee is not appointed to that individual until they're duly elected. That's why I put Representative Johnson back on committees, because she's not appointed. She's still duly elected. Representative Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In addition, I wanted to get clarification as to whether legislation I would be able to file. I was told that my legislation was eliminated because I was expelled. Will I be able to file 15 more pieces of legislation since my other bills were removed?
So your previous 15 were moved to Leader Camper, I believe, earlier, which does mean that if you don't want to have them transferred back, you have the capability to file 15 bills through delayed committee. Representative Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I intend to use all 15 of my bills to call for common sense gun legislation before we leave this session. My final question, Mr. Speaker, is that we were informed by HR that it was your decision to limit access to the building. It was your decision to cut off our ID badges and parking access. Is that true? And if so, will that be rectified?
I believe your access should be reinstated as soon as the clerk received the information, just right, like Representative Johnson's has been restored. Representative Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, because that was cut off before I was even expelled. It was cut off days prior. So just wanted to get that clarity on the record. Is there a process for additional questions that will be the best way to submit concerns to you, Mr. Speaker, moving forward if these issues are not addressed by HR?
I'm sorry, can you ask that one more time? I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will there be a process to have these issues addressed by you if they're not able to address them in HR? Because I'm consistently told that it's your decision to do these things. And so just want to make sure that we have your support and cooperation in moving forward to be restored as a full member of this body.
Yes, and we'll work with HR if there's any issues like we normally have done and will continue to do. Representative Jones?
Thank you.
All right. Hey, Representative McKenzie. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Roll call.
Roll call. Mr. Clerk, take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 95 members present.
Hey, Representative McKenzie, 1 second. Mr. Clerk, next order, please.
That completes the regular order, Mr. Speaker.
Leader Cochran, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House stand in recess until 9 a.m. on Thursday, April 13th, 2023.
Without objection, the House stands recessed till 9 a.m. on Thursday, April 13th, 2023.